Hello, everybody. We're just going to wait a minute or two for everybody to join. See, the number's still climbing up, so I can just wait another minute. Excellent. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome back for those who come every week to our HEALEY ALS Platform Trial update, and welcome to the new people as well. I'm here with Allison Balat and Catherine Small and Molly Benson. I'm Merit Cudkowicz, the sponsor of the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial. Dr. Sabrina Paganoni is on vacation and she'll be back next week. And I hope she's relaxing. So I want to just give a brief update on the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial and take any questions. We have also some questions from last week that Dr. Barry didn't get to, so we'll try to answer those as well. And hopefully the people asked have returned. Next slide, please. Just a reminder of the design of the trial. So this is the first platform trial for people with ALS, and it's a perpetual trial where we share the people assigned to placebo so that we can minimize the number of people on placebo. We share them between the different drugs that we're testing. We started first with 3 drugs, and then we added a 4th. These are all picked by a therapy evaluation committee led by Tim Miller. They include some of the leading ALS scientists. And so they really all have strong science. If someone comes into the study, they are randomly assigned to one of the 4 drugs that are currently available. And then they're again randomized 3-to-1, active drug versus placebo for 24 weeks. And then everybody has an option to go on what's called open label extension, where 100% of people get the active treatment, or people can come back and re-randomize into a different arm, or they can go into another trial. There's many options at that point. Next slide, please. So this is the update of where we are, and I'll say that we are getting very, very close to finishing the enrollment in the first 3 regimens in A, B, and C. So 686 people have signed informed consent. 541 have been then assigned to regimens. So there are about 117 people or so who wanted to be in the study, but were not eligible for different reasons. And that, as you know, is one of the primary reasons we're developing the expanded access parallel program, so that there's option for people who might want to be in research but can't for various reasons. So of the 541 people assigned to a regimen, 492 have then gone into the regimen randomized to active or placebo and started the treatment. We already have 166 people who have finished the 24 weeks. This is a relatively short study compared to other ALS studies. And after that 24 weeks, people can go in open label. And that's about 80% of the people who could go into open label have chosen to go into open label. You know, that was a question we got on one of the prior calls. So the distribution by regimen is here. So 133 in A, 151 in B, 151 in C, and 57 in D that had started later. Now our target enrollment for each regimen is 160. So something new for this week, I added, we added on the right here. There are people who have been assigned to, let's say, regimen A, but who haven't yet, done the baseline visit and started the treatment. And so as you see here, there's actually 13 people in that stage. So assuming they all go on and start the treatment, we're actually already have 146 people assigned to regimen A. And for regimen B, we're at 154, regimen C, 153, and regimen D. So we're actually very close for B and C to 160. Regimen A has the requirement for a vaccine and need to wait 2 weeks to make sure someone is vaccinated fully. So that's why it's always a little bit behind. But we are getting very close. We're actually tracking this now on a daily basis, and hope that we'll be able to announce on one of these calls soon that enrollment is complete for A, B, and C. Again, thank you for everybody who's been part of this trial. We really could not do this without this partnership with all of you. Next slide, please. Just a reminder of how to find a center. So some of you have probably heard that we had 54. We've pretty much settled on 52 now. There were 2 sites that really, for a variety of reasons, could not get activated. So we have these 42. To find a site near you, this is the website. There's also Katherine and Allison on the line here, who you can reach out to help you. And I know many of you have done that, and many people are doing that. Next slide. And this is how you reach Katherine and Allison. We will, I think we typically also put that in the chat for people if they want. We also have a link on the website that you can put some things about you or about your loved one to see if they might be eligible, as a way to make it a little easier for people. Again, that was something that our patient advisory group recommended, and I think has been very, very helpful. Next slide. Please keep sending us ideas of what it would be helpful to hear about. Some of the things that are coming up, we're going to have a session on the biomarkers that we're going to do in the platform trial. We're going to have a little series on the statistics behind the design and answer other questions people might have about trial design. And then we have invited a few of our site investigators to come and meet you. The next one will be next week, Dr. Michael Weiss from the University of Washington in Seattle. Anyway, I think this might be the last slide. Next slide. Oh, one more thing. We do tape all our webinars, and we do have a great series on the mechanism and the science behind the drugs in regimen A, B, C, and D. We will soon be having one of those for regimen E as well, our 5th one that we're hoping to start probably, I think at this point, late October or November. But these are brief, and they're quite good. So if you haven't seen them, please look at them. Next slide. And I think that might be it. And then maybe we can move to some questions. I think Katherine is going to be kind and ask the questions.
Yes, it's good exercise for me to get over Zoom stage right here. I want to start out by saying we've gotten a few comments already referring to the talk that you gave in front of the Congress subcommittee, and I can put a link to our website for anyone who hadn't heard about that or hadn't had a chance to read through it. There's a good link to our website where you can read on that. But a lot of compliments for you in the chat.
Thank you. Well, it was an honor to be on there with Brian Wallach and with Jinsey, and to try to get a message across. I think I hope it was heard loud and clear, and we're going to see some huge progress on both those bills, Act for ALS and Pathway, Promising Pathways. We need it.
Great. And so I put the link that hopefully anyone who's interested can go ahead and click that and see more. And we have one question that came in. Someone's looking to just learn a bit more about EAP. So how do EAPs work, and how do you get in?
Yeah, so EAP stands for Expanded Access Program, or it's also a compassionate use. And this is, there's a couple ways to do it. I think one of the key points is that it's something available for people who are not eligible for clinical trials. And not eligible could be for a variety of reasons. One is any doctor can apply to the FDA for an expanded access or compassionate use protocol for their patient. That's one thing. And with Rick Bedlack and Niels, we're really trying to educate all the site investigators in our network on how to do this. The FDA has changed the process to make it easier for doctors to do. So that's one. Any doctor can do it. What they do need is the company to agree to it. And that sometimes is the stumbling block. And I know this bill in front of Congress should lower the barrier, and all the advocacy that IMALS is doing should lower that barrier. But you can ask the company if they agree. You can do this for a single person, or you can do it for what's called an intermediate size EAP, which might be 10 or 20 people. They're done a little like a trial, so there's no randomization, but we still have to follow people for safety. And so people still sign a consent. They still go to the center. Sometimes we can do things more virtually. For the platform trial, we are going to have expanded access for regimen B, the Biohaven one, for regimen C, the clean, and for regimen D, the Prolennia. The Biohaven one, I'm very happy to say, has started at Mass General and should open soon at Northwestern and Duke. The clean one, we're anticipating, cross our fingers, it should start in late August at Holy Cross Hospital, Barrow Neurological Institute, and Hospital for Special Care in Connecticut. And then Prolennia regimen D, we're hoping to start end of September, and will be for sure Mass General Hospital and then Texas Neurology with Dr. Heitzman. We haven't yet confirmed the third site. So those are those moving. I would say we're even faster, but they are moving forward.
And we have a question here. Someone says that a week or two ago, Sabrina mentioned that a sponsor and drug for regimen F had been selected. Could you provide information on that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we had selected Revelatio, and they are a company that has a drug called RNS 60, and we have contracted with them, and we've worked with them on the design. We are waiting on they were doing a phase 2 study in Italy, and we're waiting for those results to be finalized to kind of decide on the next step. But they have been picked as a F. And I'm happy to say that we have 3 other companies that have applied to work with us in the platform trial, and we're just arranging to review that. So when someone applies to be part of the platform trial, we have this therapy evaluation committee review the science and if the drug is ready. And the things we look at are, is the mechanism of action important for ALS? Do they have good preclinical science and rationale? And then the third is, do they know the dose like that will get into the brain and spinal cord to be effective? And if they have those 3 things, then it's a yes.
And we have another kind of forward-thinking question here. Are you considering a multi-drug trial like the HIV cocktail, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, absolutely. I mean, that is the beauty of these platform trials. That if something works, then it becomes the baseline. Everybody's on that, and you keep adding to it. So let's say regimen A is positive, then we would want everybody to be on regimen that drug, and then still test a new one, so that we can get to really a combination that's really.
And someone's asking, are you looking at startups dealing with microbiome treatment, or where do you stand on that topic?
Yes, absolutely, we are. We just spoke to one the other day. I think there's not as much data on the microbiome in ALS as there is, for example, in multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's and some other illnesses. So we know it's different in people with ALS compared to people without ALS, but we don't know cause or effect. Like, we don't know if having ALS changes your diet or changes something, and that it's really not related to the cause, or is there something in your microbiome that causes or impacts the disease? But there's a lot of people studying that. But we are definitely talking to a couple companies that have bacterial type approaches. None of them have applied yet for the platform trial, but we're talking to them.
And then there's a question about the eligibility for the platform trial. Can those with slow progressing ALS get in? Someone's finding that they can't get into studies for that reason.
Yeah. So yes. So we actually made the platform trial more, I think, broader inclusion than some other trials. So, for example, people can have the illness up to 3 years, and their breathing can be anywhere 50% or higher. And those criteria, it can have people who have a slower course. For example, just a comparison, like the Amylyx trial, they were looking for people within the first 18 months of illness and actually looking for people who had widespread disease. So that was really selecting people who are fast progressors. And the right approach is not that clear. And on one hand, if for a trial you kind of try to have people who are progressing a little faster, you might be able to get a readout in a smaller amount of time, but you do exclude the majority of patients with ALS. So that's why we went with a broader criteria. But you are right that if somebody has the illness 5 years, 6 years, that most trials don't allow them. And I think, again, that's where expanded access is really important.
Thank you. And we have a question, an international question. Can someone from Iceland participate? And along those lines, how many study visits would there be?
Yeah, so yes, someone from, we have no restrictions from country, but we do ask, and it's important for someone to be able to get to the center and to be close, whether that means someone moves for 6 months or whether they're able to travel every 2 months. The visits are about, I can't remember now if there's 5 or 6 visits, but that's about the number and the 6.
And then there is a question here about what is considered early ALS. It seems that Neuron is helping with early ALS patients. So can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, there are different definitions for that, but the particular one for Neuron is that they saw a better response in people whose rating scale, this ALS functional rating scale, was 35 or greater. They also saw that 30 and greater, 31 and greater, but particularly in the paper 35 or greater. So that doesn't necessarily mean they're early in the illness. I mean, someone can have the illness 3 years and have a 35 on that scale, but it means that someone has a fair amount of function at that point.
And then kind of a side branch of that question is whether there are any updates about government approval pertaining to the Neuron study.
Not that I know of. And I'll just say that the FDA, they can't approve a drug if a company doesn't apply for approval. So, both for Amylyx and for Brainstorm and for any company, they can talk to the FDA and get feedback on things, but until they actually put in the application for it, for stem cells, it's called a BLA. For drug, for small molecules like Amylyx, it's called an NDA. They need to actually file so that it can be reviewed. And that's usually public information. When a company files either a BLA or NDA, it'll be publicly known.
Then back in the context of the platform trial, because we're enrolling 160 people in each regimen, once we get to those 160 participants, how long before we'll know the results?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so it'll be somewhere between 7 and 8 months later. So from the day the last person, the 160th person is enrolled, we have to wait until they finish their 24 weeks on the double-blind period. And then we also have a little bit of follow-up on safety for a couple of weeks after. And while we're cleaning the data, doing the database lock and doing the analysis. So most industry standards is 8 weeks after the last person enrolled in the study finishes their last visit. But yeah, so my guesses would be ideally 8 months. We're of course going to try to push it as fast as we can and even faster, but that is a typical. We might, I'll just say we might over enroll a little bit. So because we don't want to say if somebody's randomized, let's say to C, and all of a sudden we hit 160 in C, we're not going to tell that person they can't be in it. So probably it'll be 2 or 3 people more. So.
And we have another question about EAPs. So is there any news about whether we're going to expand and add EAP sites on the West Coast, maybe in the San Francisco or LA area?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. We are talking to the sites there, Dr. Katz and Dr. Goyal and at UCI and CPMC. So yes, I realize that we're very East Coast centered. We have one in the middle.
And we have a question here. Are more and more smaller pharma companies entering the ALS space, or what's been your experience with that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think I try to keep a running list, and I'm sure I'm missing some, but we have over 180 companies in the ALS space, and the majority are small companies, but there are certainly large ones as well. I think because of the science and that there are targets to go after, and the need, that it's an attractive area for pharma to go into right now. It's exciting.
And I think this question is referring to the ALS FRSR. Someone's asking, they say the scale seems to be subjective. Sometimes the score changes depending on who's asking and how they interpret the answer. So can you speak to that?
Sure. I, I think the scale is not as bad as maybe the recent press has been getting some not that great press, but you do have to train people, and so we do a lot of training in meals in the platform trial, so that people ask the question consistently. And it is really important to try to not change the person asking it in a particular person, but sometimes that's unavoidable because people go on holiday or they're not there that day. But with really good training, you can get rid of some of that noise. And we know that over time, over 6 months, it's actually it's a useful score. But you're right that like 1 week to another or 1 month for another, you can get a fair amount of variability. But over time, you can get a good estimate of someone's disease. But we still need to do better. I mean, it would be great to develop better outcome measures, but it's still a pretty good one.
There is a question about why participants in the platform trial aren't able to know whether they were on placebo or active drug when they finished participating.
It's a good question. So this isn't unique to the platform trial. It's actually every clinical trial that for it to be valid and for you to be able to believe the results, people can't know what they were on until the study is over, and so until the last person finishes. And it's because let's say you do start telling some people what they were on, and let's say you tell them that they were on active drug and they feel like they didn't do well, then all of a sudden everyone's going to think the drug doesn't work, and it might really not be a true thing. So it really creates some bias, and that can make the trial not interpretable. Now, I do think that at the end of the study, when you tell people what they were on, it's highly variable by trial and by industry sponsor. I do think we should be telling people pretty much as soon as we have the results of the trial what they were on, and that's our aim for the platform trial, is not to make people wait any longer than necessary.
And I think there's a follow-up question here about the ALS FRSR, and someone's wondering if it's possible for patients to fill it out themselves, if that would help with the variability.
Yeah, it's a good question, I think we should move there. It hasn't been yet done that way. So there have been studies that have shown that whether we get it on the phone or we do it over Zoom or in person or through the person's loved one or spouse, that it's highly reliable. What people haven't shown yet is whether self-doing it is the same. But I think that's not a hard study to do. And if someone could do that and show it's equivalent, then that could simplify, it could be a way again to streamline trials.
And Molly, I don't know if we can pull up the slide deck again. We have a question just seeking clarification about those extra numbers that we had on the enrollment slide.
I knew some of you would like that. It's like a little extra information, which I think is really important. It's what we're tracking now every day. So let's say if we go into like regimen B, so 151 people have been randomized to either active drug or placebo, and they've started the drug. But there are some people that they did the first what we call the master level screening. They're eligible for the trial. They've been randomized to group B, but they haven't yet been randomized to active or drug and started it. So there's 3 people, for example, in that window. So within the next week or a couple of days, they will be on the drug. So and same for for a regimen C. There's 2 people that have been assigned to regimen C, but they haven't come in yet and done their what we call a baseline visit and started the treatment. And for A, there's 13 people in that kind of state. And so we're following it closely that way because, again, we know we're getting close to the 160 people that are needed for a regimen. And when we get there, then we would stop enrolling people in that regimen. And then, the nice thing is there are other options. So obviously there's regimen D, and then soon there'll be regimen E.
And then I think we've got a follow-up question here about when we were talking about kind of that drug cocktail combination therapy idea. So could you just clarify when you're talking about if a drug is promising and shows that it's effective, would that be something that patients would add as a combination therapy based on the results of this trial, or would that be something that has to wait until that drug goes through full FDA approval?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think it'll depend completely on the results and that company. So let's say we have a home run, which I hope we have 4 home runs actually, but let's say we have one that's really works and is safe, reasonably safe. Then and the company wants to work with us on a combination. We could amend the protocol and do it, right away. Let's say it was not that clear, maybe a little on the fence, and they have to have some discussions around with the FDA. Then we couldn't probably do it right away. So, I mean, that is how other platform trials have worked, but it requires, knowing a little bit more about the drug and the interactions, and the company being willing to do that, and obviously some FDA discussions. But there's certainly precedent of doing it that way in platform trials, and it is one of the advantages of platform trials. I just want to add that in a way we are doing a cocktail in that people can be on riluzole, they can be on edaravone. Any drug that comes on the market, people can be on. So we're planning for that already. If any of these other drugs that we've been talking about do come on the market, that we would that people could start taking it. It might mean that we might have to add to sample size. We might, because that adds some variability to the data, that we might have to maybe go to 170, 180, but that's a good problem to have.
And then someone is wondering, of the 160 patients that we showed are on open label extension, are we able to report any promising outcomes based on that yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. So not yet. No, I haven't. We haven't not looked at that data. There is a data safety board that is looking at that all the time, but they're looking more for safety. So I would, because we know people are on it, I think we could have to actually look at it, but we haven't done that yet.
And I think there's another question related to open label. So wouldn't participants on placebo who elect open label, wouldn't they figure out their status when they need to be followed for safety at that point? A lot of trials have shown that it is actually hard to know whether somebody's on placebo or not. So in something we always ask people at the end of the study, did you think you got the active drug or did you think you got placebo? And we asked the site staff too. And I'm always surprised that people can't guess. I mean, that's true in every study I've been part of. So I don't think people can tell when they go in the open label whether they were on it before or not. The other thing I would say, the open label extension, we do it for a couple of reasons. One, it's the right thing to do for people that were in the study, to provide that drug until we know if the drug works or not, and if it works, to continue to give it. But it also, as we learned on the Amylyx trial, can provide really important additional data that can help with approval. So the longer safety, as well as the effects of starting it 6 months later versus 6 months earlier, and other outcome measures. So it's helpful in many ways. And earlier you were mentioning that participants can take Radicava while they're in the study. Are there any restrictions for any of the regimens, or is that across all of the regimens?
It's across for all the regimens. That's really anything that is FDA approved is allowed.
And then we have some questions that are related to other trials. I've got one more about the platform trial here. So as a hypothetical, if regimen B is proved to be effective, but the FDA doesn't approve it quickly, could the other participants be able to receive EAP or expanded access for that medication?
I think theoretically, yes. I mean, it would be up to the first decision maker for EAP is the company that owns the drug, right? Are willing to provide an EAP for people. And then the second decider is kind of the FDA. Is that all right? But I don't see any big reason why it wouldn't be possible. Again, for EAPs, as we heard at Congress a lot, what everybody's worried about is, if you do a lot of EAPs, will that stop clinical trial progress? Will people not go in trials? And I honestly don't think that's a problem. And Dr. Andrews also said that. And the FDA does require for EAPs that people are not eligible for other trials. And they require that in the protocol. So it's really for people can't be in trials, but we know that half the people with ALS are not eligible for trials currently. So there's a lot of people that could be getting EAPs.
And I think that wraps up the platform trial questions. I don't know if we want to answer the other questions offline or if we want to get to some of them today.
I'm okay to do, maybe we'll do a few more. I know we're a little over, but.
Okay. So we do have some good questions, kind of forward thinking here. Do you foresee any trials for asymptomatic gene positive patients?
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually one that started the first ever. It's called Atlas. It's led by Biogen. It's a gene therapy for people who carry FTD1 genes mutations, and so that's just started, and it's a real milestone. I mean, it's that we're doing that, and hopefully there'll be similar approaches for C9 and FUS and the other gene mutations. I also think we can learn from following people at risk for ALS, from also learn about sporadic disease. So I think it's going to be helpful for everybody.
Do you know, is there any data being collected regarding FTD ALS?
Yeah, there are several studies now mainly in like C9, so the familial form of ALS called C9, where some people can have FTD and some ALS and some both. So there's some now, for example, the Wave Therapeutics has a gene therapy for C9 that includes both people with the FTD form versus the ALS. So I think it's really just starting, and the ALS and FTD communities are really collaborating on bringing some trials and studies together.
Then a question here is, just kind of from your perspective, are there any new drugs in the pipeline that seem to show promise?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. That's excitement, is that we have 180 companies working on it. I think Biogen has this new study I think a lot of people know about, which is a gene therapy for sporadic ALS, and it's a drug that lowers something called ataxin-2 that Aaron Gittler at Stanford showed is very much related to the protein aggregation in ALS motor neurons, and that lowering the ataxin-2 can help with axon growth and getting rid of those aggregates. And what's exciting is the target's important, but also that all that knowledge from gene therapies in the familial form is now being turned to use to lower a gene target in sporadic disease. So that's a phase 1 safety dose finding study that is enrolling. But that's just one of many that are really hopeful.
Can you shed light on if Mastanib will seek FDA approval based on the results?
Yeah, I don't know the company's plans, and for disclosure, I am on their steering committee, so I haven't heard of their filing, but I do know that they obviously are doing a phase 3 trial. So I think that's the path they're going, is to do a second study, and that is in Europe and a few centers in the US as well.
And we've got a couple more questions here. So someone's asking if you know anything about the status of a clinical trial that was assessing fecal microbiota transplantation and the effect on ALS. It was completed April 2022, or to be completed April 2022.
Yeah, I know that there are some studies like this going on. I don't know if this one you're talking about. I know there's one in Italy, and I know the group in Israel is thinking about it. I have not heard any results.
And then I think someone's seeking clarification on the results of the neurone and any benefits that were shown from that trial.
Yeah, I will say that we have, written the paper. It's under review, and I really hope that will get accepted and out there so everyone can see all the data. And we want to have a webinar again to really show all the data. I think, again, the big picture, when you looked at everybody in the study, and you looked at the rate of change of ALS, FRS, or responders, it was not a positive study. But when they looked at people who started treatment when their ALS functional range scale was higher, they did see a difference with more people on the drug having what they call the responder effect, which is slowing down the rate of change by 1.5 points or more, I believe, and about a 2-point difference in ALS FRS at 6 months. Now, that wasn't statistically significant because, again, the sample size is much smaller when you cut into smaller groups. but there was that difference, clinical difference.
And then we did get another question about Mastanib, and I know that was a question that came in last week for Dr. Berry as well. Allison actually shared a link in the chat, and I'm wondering if that's something we might want to send out to the chat so attendees can see that and read more there. Because that does seem to be a hot topic as well.
Yeah. Well, what was the question?
So the question was if there was any news on Mastanib. So I think a lot of people, based on the recent data, are just curious where that trial stands and where the discussion is heading.
Yeah, they publicly did share that study was put on pause for some cardiac reasons. I think that so they temporarily paused enrollment, but they're getting ready to resume that. And that, that's what you learn in a trial. You learn what the side effects are. You learn how to mitigate them. But I think there's a commitment to obviously continuing it and get an answer about whether it works or not in people with ALS.
And I think that wraps up the questions for tonight's webinar.
Good to see everybody. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next week. Bye, Allison. Bye, Katherine.